The morning started like any other that I made breakfast. I packed a lunch. I reminded my son to brush his teeth twice because he always forgot the second time. I kissed him on the top of his head when he wasn't paying attention, which he pretended to hate. His name was Ben. He was 9 years old. He was the kind of child who asked questions about everything: how planes stayed up, why onions made you cry, whether fish knew they were wet. He was curious and loud and generous and, in the way of children who don't yet know the world has edges, completely unguarded with his heart. That morning, he was nervous. His school was holding its annual career day. Parents had been invited to come in and talk about their jobs. Ben had signed me up without asking, which was very Ben. He had written my name on the form in large, slightly crooked letters that I and the space labeled parent's job. He had written, "My mom works at a company." He didn't know more than that. I had never told him more than that I dropped him at school, watched him run through the front doors without looking back, and then sat in the car for a moment. Today was the day I had been quietly preparing for without fully admitting it, the day my son was going to find out who his mother actually was, and I was more nervous than he was. My name is Sandra Cole. I am 41 years old and the chief executive officer of a mid-sized logistics company called Meridian Group, based in Atlanta. We employ just over 400 people. We move goods across 12 states. We have clients whose names most people would recognize. I have been featured in business publications. I have been on panels. I have given speeches to rooms full of people who took notes. I am also a woman who packs school lunches and argues about screen time, and once spent 45 minutes on the floor of a toy store negotiating with a 9-year-old about whether a particular set of building blocks was a necessity or a luxury. Ben and I had lived together, just the two of us, since he was 4. His father and I divorced amicably. That word that means, it was painful, but we handled it like adults, for the sake of the child who was watching. His father, Marcus, lived across town. He was a good father. Ben saw him every other weekend and every Wednesday evening. Ben's daily world was me, and I had, over the years, made a deliberate choice about how much of my professional life I brought home. The answer was, very little. Not because I was ashamed of my work. I was proud of it. But I had watched too many parents, my own included, allow work to become the loudest thing in the house. The thing that got the most energy, the most attention, the most space. I didn't want that. So at home, I was mom. Just mom. Ben had accepted this without much question because children accept the world they're given. He knew I had a job. He knew I went to an office. He knew I sometimes had to travel, which he didn't love but had learned to manage with the help of his grandmother and a standing promise that I would always bring him something from wherever I went. He knew I had a phone that made noise at inconvenient times and a laptop that lived on the kitchen table. He did not know my title. He did not know the size of the company. He did not know that my decisions affected hundreds of families. He did not know that people in meetings sometimes waited for me to speak before they formed their own opinions. How do you explain that to a 9-year-old? I had always told myself I would when the time was right. I wasn't sure the time was ever going to feel right. And so it kept not happening. 2 weeks before career day, his teacher Ms. Ellison had sent home a note asking parents to prepare a short talk, 5 to 8 minutes, about what they did for work and what they had learned from doing it. That night, Ben had sat at the kitchen table working on his homework while I made dinner, and he said without looking up, "Mom, what are you going to say about your job?" "What do you want me to say?" I asked. He thought about it. "Tell them something real," he said. "Not just the boring stuff." I laughed. "Okay," I said. "Something real." He went back to his homework. I stood at the stove and thought about what real actually meant, and whether I had been giving him enough of it. Career day was on a Friday. The school gymnasium had been set up with rows of chairs and a small podium at the front. About 15 parents were scheduled to speak. I had arrived early, a professional habit, and sat near the back until Ben's class filed in. He spotted me immediately and waved with both hands, the way small children wave, with their whole body involved. I waved back. He turned to the boy beside him and said something I couldn't hear but could read from his expression, "That's my mom." There was a pride in it that settled somewhere warm inside my chest. The talks before mine were good. A firefighter showed photos. A dentist brought models of teeth that made several children visibly uneasy. A veterinarian brought a very calm rabbit that completely dominated the room for 6 minutes. Then Ms. Ellison called my name and said, "Next we have Ben's mother, Sandra Cole." I walked to the front. I looked at the rows of 9-year-old faces, wide-eyed, fidgety, genuinely curious in the way children are when something new is in front of them. I found Ben in the 3rd row. He was sitting up very straight. He looked proud and also slightly nervous, the way children look when a parent is about to do something public. I looked at him for just a moment. Then I said, "My name is Sandra. And I'm going to tell you what I actually do, because I don't think I've told anyone in this room the full answer to that question before." Ben's eyebrows went up slightly. I started simply. I told them I ran a company. I explained what a company was in terms they could understand, a group of people working together toward the same goal, like a sports team, but instead of winning games, they were moving things from one place to another so that stores and hospitals and schools could have what they needed. I told them our company had over 400 people in it. I saw Ben go still. I kept talking. I told them what a CEO did, that it meant Chief Executive Officer, which was a title that meant you were responsible for making the big decisions. Not every decision. You had people around you who were very good at their specific jobs, and your job was to listen to them, understand the full picture, and then choose the direction. It sounds powerful, I said. And in some ways it is. But mostly it's about people. It's about understanding what each person needs to do their best work, and making sure they have it. I looked at Ben. His mouth was slightly open. I told them about the first time I had ever run a meeting. I was 26, terrified, convinced everyone in the room knew more than I did. I told them that feeling never fully goes away. That the difference between being new at something and being experienced at it is not that the fear disappears, it's that you learn to work alongside the fear instead of waiting for it to leave. A boy in the front row raised his hand. "Are you famous?" he asked. The room laughed. I smiled. "Not the way you mean," I said. Ben hadn't moved. He was watching me the way I had never seen him watch anything before, with a kind of recalibration happening behind his eyes. After the formal talks, there was a short question and answer session, and then parents mingled with the children over juice and crackers. Ben found me almost immediately. He came through the crowd with the focused directness of someone with a specific destination. He stopped in front of me. He looked up at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was somewhere between surprised and serious and something else I didn't quite have a name for. 400 people, he said. Just over, I said. And you're the boss? Of all of them? I'm the CEO. Which means I'm responsible for the direction of the company. I have managers who lead teams. But yes, I'm at the top. He processed this. Why didn't you tell me? I crouched down to his level. Because when I'm home, I'm your mom. That's the job that matters most to me. I didn't want the other stuff to take up all the space. He looked at me for a long moment. But I would have wanted to know, he said. That landed quietly. And honestly. I know, I said. I think I was wrong about that. He looked down at his juice cup. He was thinking. I could always tell when Ben was genuinely thinking because he went unusually still. Then he looked up and said, "Are there more questions you didn't answer?" That question stayed with me all weekend. Not because it hurt, though it sat with some tenderness, but because it was so completely fair. He had put his finger, with a child's precision, on something I had been telling myself was protection but was actually, at least in part, avoidance. I had protected him from the stress of my work. That was real. Board meetings and budget shortfalls and personnel decisions were not things a 9-year-old needed to carry. But I had also kept him from a fuller picture of who I was. And those are not the same thing. On Sunday afternoon, while Marcus had been for his weekend visit, I sat at the kitchen table and thought about what I wanted to change. Not dramatically, I wasn't going to turn our household into a business seminar. But something needed to shift. Ben came home Sunday evening with his backpack and a drawing he'd made at his dad's house. He set the drawing on the table without explanation and went to wash his hands. When he came back, he sat down across from me and said, "Dad says he knew about your job." "He did," I said. "He said you worked really hard to get it." "I did." Ben looked at the drawing he'd made. It was a building, tall, with lots of windows, and a figure standing in front of it. The figure had long hair. "Is that supposed to be me?" I asked. He shrugged in a careful way that meant yes. That evening, after dinner, I sat with Ben on the couch and I told him the real story. Not the professional biography, not the version I gave in speeches. The real version. The one with the texture of actual life in it. I told him about growing up without much money, in a small apartment in Memphis with my mother and grandmother. I told him about deciding at 14 that I wanted to run something, I didn't know what, just something. That I wanted to build something real. I told him about college on a partial scholarship, about working 2 jobs in my early 20s, about the first job in logistics that had seemed unglamorous but had turned out to be exactly right. About the decade of steady, deliberate work. About the failures, and there had been real ones, and what I had learned from each. I told him about the day I was offered the CEO position at Meridian. I had been in a conference room in Atlanta, and the board chair had told me, and I had said thank you very professionally, and then I had gone to my car and cried for 10 minutes because I had wanted it so long and it had finally arrived. Ben listened to all of it without interrupting, which was unusual. His juice sat untouched on the coffee table. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Were you scared? Even now, when things are hard at work?" "Yes," I said. "Sometimes." "You don't look scared," he said. "That's the job," I said. "Not hiding it. Just not letting it make the decisions." He thought about that. "I get scared at school sometimes," he said quietly. "Like when I don't know the answer and someone calls on me." "I know that feeling exactly," I said. He looked at me. "Really? Really?" Something shifted between us after that conversation. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet, real shift, the kind that happens when 2 people move from one version of knowing each other to a truer one. Ben started asking me about work in a new way. Not in a pressured or serious way, he was still 9, still primarily interested in his friends and his building sets and whether there were any good snacks in the house. But occasionally, over dinner, he would ask something genuine. "Did anything hard happen at work today? Did you have to make a big decision? Did anyone disagree with you?" I answered honestly. Not with every detail, there were things that weren't appropriate or useful to share with a child. But with the truth of it. Yes, something hard happened. Yes, someone disagreed, and here's what we did about it. He listened with that particular attention he brought to things he decided mattered. One evening he said, "Do the 400 people know you're nice at home?" I laughed. "I hope I'm nice at work too," I said. "You're nicer at home," he said, very matter-of-factly. Then he went back to his dinner. Months later, his class did a writing project, a short essay about a person they admired. Ms. Ellison shared it with me privately before the school displayed them on the hall board. Ben had written about me. Not about the company. Not about the CEO title. He had written, My mom works really hard and she gets scared sometimes, but she doesn't let it stop her. I want to be like that. Career day was just one morning. But what came from it lasted in a way that one morning rarely does. I had spent years trying to protect Ben from my work life by keeping the two things completely separate. I thought I was being a good mother. And in some ways, I was. Boundaries between work and home are real and valuable. Children shouldn't be burdened with things that aren't theirs to carry. But there is a difference between protecting a child from stress and protecting yourself from being fully seen. I had done both, thinking they were the same thing. They weren't. Ben didn't need to know about board decisions or quarterly reports. But he needed to know that his mother had worked hard for something, had been afraid and kept going, had built something real from a small apartment in Memphis and a decision made at 14. He needed to know that the person who made his lunch and argued about screen time and kissed him on the top of his head was also someone with a whole, full, complex life, and that both things could be true at once. He needed a complete picture. And I had been giving him a partial one, thinking I was being kind. He graduated out of that primary school 2 years later. At the small ceremony, each child said one thing they were proud of learning that year. When it was Ben's turn, he stood up straight, my son who asked questions about everything, who was loud and generous and completely unguarded with his heart, and he said, "I learned that the people you think you know completely are sometimes still full of surprises." He looked at me when he said it. I looked back at him. And I thought, yes. That's it exactly. Keep asking. Keep looking. The people you love are always deeper than you think.